There we are. Hi, good evening. I'm Ruth Almond Viviora, and my brother Greenbrier has asked me to be his guest host tonight. He's out of town, and I'm interviewing Mike Oldacre. And I'll let Mike introduce himself a little bit, and then I have questions for Mike. So, who
Well,
are
thank you, Ruth. Well, the reason that Ruth has asked me to be here is because we have been playing music at the bookstore for several months now. I think we just finished our 90th week of playing music at the bookstore, and so she asked me, and I was very reluctant to come on the air to talk about anything else, but she's a big music lover, and if you get to know her very well at all, she really can work you. And so she has talked me into coming in here and talking about the music idea and vision that we started those 90 weeks ago.
Great, and we'll get right to that music, some questions I have about the music. Let me just refresh our audience on what TLC is, my brother's program. It's called Tender Loving Care, and Greenbrier started this program well over 25 years ago with the idea of a holistic view of life. And that the idea of, he's a physician, but he's a psychiatrist, so the idea of body and spirit, or the medicine and the spiritual or faith part of life combined together. And I'm a great believer in God being interested in beauty and giving us beauty, that helps us connect to the Creator. And God's given us visual arts, like paintings and photography, which I love, and creative writing, like nonfiction and poetry and fiction. And I have a son who's working on a master's in nonfiction right now. And gardening, which I like to do a little bit of. And obviously some of you have seen my sister-in-law's garden there across from Wendy's. And music. So I think music comes under that beauty that God gives us. Now, I don't have any real talents in any of these areas, but I'm a great audience. I love to come and view people's visual arts, or I love to listen to the music. Like, I don't have any sense of rhythm, and I certainly can't sing, but I love listening to music and learning about it. So tonight we're going to talk about music, and I made a little list, Mike, but just to chat between us, what are different kinds of music that you can think of off the top of your head?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, sure you do.
I mean, there are the music that's played down there is such a eclectic representation of music. You hear a little what's called progressive country, traditional country, what a lot of folks around here would call old-timey music. There's folk music. There's jazz, of course. There's rock music. There's country rock. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
And on. There's a lot of different kinds of music. There's choral music. There's gospel music. I mean,
you've brought in some that I hadn't thought of. Good job.
I think there's a lot more. There's reggae. I mean, you could continue to, and I'm sure. I think at one point, as a matter of fact, one of my more learned and more knowledgeable musicians told me that if you look it up, there are over 100 different categories for music today.
I was happy to put about 10 down on my list. And you've mentioned some I hadn't thought of. Of course, hymns, but you said choral music and hymns and musicals. Blues, of course, hip-hop. And isn't that the one where people rhyme everything together? Is that...
well, I think within hip-hop there's
Yeah.
different... Yeah, that's basically part of what it is. Yeah.
And classical, we don't want to... my father-in-law
Sorry
had
that
sung
I
in...
didn't mention that.
My father-in-law sang in the opera in Chicago.
Really?
Yeah, he was trained as an opera. My husband's stepfather.
Really?
Laverne sang in opera. Yeah, he sang a song at our wedding here in Buchanan. My husband and my wedding 33 years ago, but he also sang opera.
The Marilyn Lawson, who you may know, and my mom, Mona Oldacre, both loved opera. And they would, and I think that Frank and Jane Williams also loved opera. They would go to Pittsburgh, still may do so. Marilyn and Mona used to go to hear at Pittsburgh when the opera was there. And here's just a little bit of information about opera that I didn't know much about. One of the musicians that comes down to sing and play at Trainwreck, which is the name of the the weekly entertainment that we have in the bookstore, he said he was trained in opera as a young man. And I didn't realize that your voice would be actually constructed, that they can, if you're trained at an early enough age, they can direct your voice in development to a certain tone that is supportive of the music in opera. So he has a very high-pitched sound. His voice, he has a very high range, and he said that he thought, his parents really thought at one point when he was a young man that he would get into opera, but the opportunities in opera it's very, very competitive, and you have to be very, very talented, obviously, to do much in opera.
I'm not a big opera fan, but obviously I know people that are, and obviously my father-in-law and your mom had been then. And Ellen Carter, who used to be pastor at First United Methodist Church here, she lives in Pittsburgh and goes to the symphony all the time.
Does
so
she?
That's another area
Another
of
outlet
music,
for music,
classical music more. But your music is basically bluegrass, isn't? I mean, or under that, or
No, it's
No?
not really
Okay.
bluegrass. It's just a.
when I hear
it is-
banjos, I just think bluegrass. That tends
Yeah,
to be
no,
my.
we wish we had more bluegrass musicians. And there are so many different opinions from the musicians that you meet and talk to over those 90 weeks. And we've seen so many different types of musicians that have come in and played. And we wish we had more bluegrass musicians. But actually, the bluegrass musicians, most of the ones that I've been exposed to through this exercise, if the moment that you're offering music, and it is there's two different types of styles of music in a venue like we have that are offered. One of them is an open mic, and one is a jam session. So if they walk in, it's an open mic, and they listen, and there's two people who perform, let's say, a sort of a grunge music, and the next person plays folk music. Our experience has been that those bluegrass musicians they want to play bluegrass. Bluegrass is not being offered here, and and we can't keep them around, and we would love to, because we assume that eventually, if we would have that combination, which did happen 3 weeks ago, where we had a fiddle player, a banjo player,
Yes.
two banjo players, and two guitar players, bass. We had all the elements. So we were able to play old-timey music and a little bit of bluegrass. And of course, the people who are involved in those two different styles of music, most of them play both. But the very good old-time musicians may not necessarily know how to play. If they're playing banjo, if they're playing fiddle, they may not know that much about bluegrass. So bluegrass is what most people would associate with a banjo. And I'm just listening to these musicians. I'm taking all this in, but I know that a couple we've had one very talented, Ben Townsend, who has come down to the area and is moving here. He'll be a major addition. He's really truly like a world-class musician, because he plays in bands. Right now he's touring in the Netherlands. He has played with groups in Germany and in England and in Ireland. He's played on Mountain Stage many, many times, and he's moving to Buchanan.
Wow.
But
and his name again for our audience?
His name is Ben Townsend, and he'll be a welcome addition to our community. And he's truly an old-time musician. So his strength and his expertise is in several instruments, but he grew up, started playing the fiddle at age 4.
Wow.
So that's his natural talent. That's where he is most gifted. And his whole description of how old-time musicians play and how they are receptive to other musicians and try to include them in their musical coming together, if you will, is a lot different than the bluegrass musician. The bluegrass musician, they more or less, when bluegrass musicians are playing, they kind of take turns playing. Like the mandolin player will be focused and featured, and then the banjo player will, and the fiddle, but whereas in old time music, it's more always played together, and the fiddle player always is, I mean, generally is the one who introduces the music. So
Please.
excuse me for
No, he's doing
digressing
great,
on about
isn't he?
that,
It's
but
so
I'm just
interesting. That's
passing
exactly
on
right.
what those folks are teaching me, and so we hope we will find more bluegrass musicians in the future, and old-timey musicians as well.
Well, you've mentioned the 90 weeks that you have this, that you've been having this train wreck at your store. And that's one thing I wanted to kind of let our audience know, that I didn't know what you called it. I just thought it was a hometown jam session, and I'm glad you have a title for it, or what you call it, the train wreck. The first time Mike invited me to come was a couple summers ago. I just come home for a week or two in the summer, and he said he was having this, and everybody was sitting around in a circle and they were playing. This time when I've been there, people have been taking turns more, so it does have a little different feel to it.
Yeah, the experience will change from week to week, and it has been more taking turns.
It could be because you've moved it to the back of the store and there's a little bit of stage, versus
there
having
is.
the circle.
Yes.
Tell me about this whole movement, because I remember when you first told me about this a couple years ago, that there's some kind of movement like this going on in the United States.
Well, I mean, I haven't studied it or really researched it, but when I have listened to other people who have told me about it, like for instance, the reason we started this was Nick Conger, who is a professor at Washington Wesleyan College, teaches marketing and economics, and had moved here from a town close to Floyd, Virginia, which is, I think, one of the more famous places in the country, where a country store where the owner started offering opportunities for musicians to hang around and started playing music. And of course, they were good musicians, so people came to listen, and they played more and more musicians came. And so now, I think from what I understand, I've been told this by other folks from Buchanan. There's friends of mine, other Old Acres, who are friends with those folks who live in Floyd, Virginia. And the whole town has really become consumed by this feeling of sharing music. So I think in Floyd's, I think during the week you can go and they'll be playing music in there, but I think the weekend is where it kind of turns into a music community. Now those kind of things are happening elsewhere, and that's the model that we were kind of basing our idea, our vision on. And of course, Evan Johns was the manager of the bookstore at the time, and he was coming from a tradition where he was living in Morgantown, where people had jam sessions and open mics there. So he jumped right in and sat down by himself on one Friday night in October a year and a half ago, and just started playing. And pretty soon, if someone else came and joined him, and as the Fridays went by, we just went from 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Just kept growing.
When I was there last week, I counted 15 musicians that I knew of in the room, and then a few of us audience people, maybe 10 of us or so. There's a crowd of about
we don't
25, 30 people that just.
It's not something that we've ever advertised.
No.
We don't ever really. I don't really talk about it much, because it really is more for the musicians. I would like to. I mean, it'd be great if people would listen, but. We've had some developmental changes in how we were going to do things, and that's why. One of the reasons I came on here is because we are moving out of that space, and we're going to be looking for another place. And when I say we, all those musicians will be looking for another home to play on Fridays or Saturdays or some day during the week. And this tradition has been around for a while too. Mark Lynch, now he is a traditional bluegrass mandolin player. That's what he's known for, and he's been a wonderful addition to this region. Introducing bluegrass music to Lewis County High School, where they still continue to this day to have a bluegrass band that plays, and lessons are taught. And so they actually, instead of just having your traditional marching band, they also have a bluegrass group. And Mark Lynch introduced that many years ago, and has brought quality bluegrass music and alternative country music into performances to raise money for that band for several times over the years. And of course, Mark played with us some as well. When he was there often, of course, we had more of a bluegrass component. But Mark is not with us much right now, and hopefully someday we'll get a chance to revisit with him. His brother Tom shows up and plays harmonica for Tom and Tom.
I love the harmonica.
Yes, and there's 3 or 4 different harmonica players that show up and contribute. So, and that's why the music just kind of we'll have one person will stand up and play music, old time country music. Henry is a great story, and there's several musicians like him that hadn't played music for maybe 10 years, 15 years. For whatever reason, those folks stopped performing. Sometimes it would be a death in the family, a death in a relationship, whatever reason that people stop playing. I've had 5 different, when I say it's really not, I mean the space, the experience creates the conditions in which those musicians would feel welcome enough, and people would reach out to them enough that they would start playing again. And so we've watched this metamorphosis take place with these musicians, and
Love it.
and then those musicians will show up time and time again. So it's really that's one of the real rewards for those of us like Ruthie and I who are not great musicians, but really enjoy that experience of the sharing of those musicians and their lives. And Henry, in playing his music, does write his own songs which celebrate a major character in his life, his mother, his father, and other family members. They're coming and going, and he sings with emotion, and you can feel it. And so he's one of my favorite musicians to listen to, and to think that he didn't have a stage to perform on. He didn't want to go into the traditional bar and grill settings, to perform, which unfortunately is how most musicians have to make a living. They have to, they make a living somewhere by being paid for performances somewhere. In this case, Henry got enough comfort with the surroundings that he just started playing again. And so not to belittle the point, but it was he and like I said, there was 5 musicians who have done this, and they one other fellow was his name is Larry. Larry's a really good musician that comes in there and plays.
I've heard him play. He is very good.
60s and 70s music primarily, and his granddaughter Elena won the Strawberry Festival Idol contest, and is a young 15-year-old who you just watched her come in, and she was so nervous she only could sing with a CD, and as every week went by, she just got better and better and more confident, and then she wins the Strawberry Idol contest and
changed this little girl's life.
Her life.
We may be buying her CDs.
We might be someday. It's really a great thing to watch,
Wonderful.
So I want to encourage her and give her as many opportunities as we can to play and sing wherever we can find a place. So.
And the audience, like that I come and someone told me musicians do like a little bit of audience and people that'll clap for them. So, and Mike, you said something about this Friday night gathering that you have. People don't pay to come; they can just show up.
No, they have. I think the most people we've ever had there was 45. We had 45 people in there one time, because that's because of texting and the social media. When we've had whenever there's college age younger people there, that seems like there's more of an effort to communicate and bring in like-minded, like-aged folks. So we've had as many as 45, but it is free. There was
about 30
charge.
The other evening when I went.
Yeah.
And I think it's like starts around 8 o'clock in the evening
around
or so.
8 o'clock, and it's not because it isn't considered performances. These are people doing. Sometimes it'll evolve into a jam session where all the musicians will get up and play together, especially when Henry plays. But there isn't any fee. There isn't any. It's just,
and people drop in, or
children come in. We had 5 children. I think the last time we stopped in. So
you can leave when the kids are ready for bed, I know I left at 11:30 last Friday, and you all were still going strong. But I needed to leave.
Usually the standard is about 11 o'clock, but sometimes the musicians, they get that special connection, and the feeling's right, and they just play and play and play. Or someone comes in late, and sometimes we've been there till 2 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
I mean, it's That's unusual, but it does happen.
Which brings us a little bit to, as Mike said, why we wanted to have Mike on the show. And this is Tender Loving Care, and this is Dr. Greenbrier Allman's program, but I'm his sister, Ruth, and Greenbrier allowed me to be guest host this week, and I'm interviewing Mike Oldacre, whose family has had the bookstore for years, but the bookstore's closing, and Mike no longer will have the building at the end of this month, so just a couple more weeks. And every Friday night for the last 90 weeks, Mike has had a place where musicians could come and play just on an open mic or an open jam time. And he's going to be looking for a new venue, and it's wonderful to have it downtown so that people can comfortably come downtown. So some of you watching may have an idea of where, or you may own one of the buildings downtown that you'd be happy after hours to have this group of people come into your building and be able to play music, just to keep this cultural phenomena alive in Buchanan. So if you have such a building or interest, or you love music and you know how to kind of maybe arrange and help Mike find a place that he could continue this idea, I'd love for you to get in touch with Mike through the bookstore. The bookstore is still open until July 1st. And I kind of know how this works, Mike, because I when I was mentioning, the different arts and beauty and performance, I forgot dance. And my firstborn son is a swing dancer, and he loves swing dance. And he has, in Orlando, Florida, where we live, a swing dance night. He has a friend who has a restaurant. He rents the restaurant from midnight to 4 a.m. every Friday night, where people come to swing dance, and you never know who's going to show up. And he has between 20 and 50 people every week that come to swing dance. And he loves swing dancing. Now, they have a little cover charge because they have to pay a DJ to do the music. But otherwise, so that's a little different. And he has to pay the restaurant man to use the restaurant for a little bit of a fee.
Sure.
But your idea is a little different with the music, that these are just people dropping in, different people week to week. And the variety, that's what I loved. The variety of people. And so it's a great way for young, old, people of huge different backgrounds. And then the fun thing of Buchanan is these little interconnections that you make with people that, they know someone that you knew. And that's just fun, the networking that goes on. Do you have any more? We've talked about your needs, the need for another venue. Anything more about the people that you've come? I love your little stories about some of the...
Well, there's a lot of stories to be told. There really are. But before I tell any more stories about some of the musicians who've come, another venue, it's not necessarily... it doesn't make a difference, really honestly, if I'm involved in this or not, but it's just...
Mike is a wonderful, let me interrupt him though, he's a wonderful host. He makes everybody feel welcomed and comfortable, and he then helps with the other part of this, which I think is valuable, is the community part of it, where people, yes, they play, but they connect to each other, and there's a community that goes on. Even when I thought of this word, because I'm a person of faith, and one time when we were having communion at our church, my children were young, and one of my boys said to me, Mom, are we going to have community today? And he mixed the words up, but they really do mix up. That communion with God, of course, which is important to us faith people, but community, communion with each other, the words are connected. And Mike's a wonderful host in hosting this group.
Well, it's something that, we had the space, really quality people, Evan, Nick, and George Trepner, George has been a huge influence in this whole thing. He's provided the sound and the equipment, and is the reliable bass player that kind of holds the foundation together all the time. George is a talented bass player. And Guy Howard brings his emotion. He has so much emotion that he brings, and now he's getting to watch his son develop right before his eyes, which is a special joy for him. And there are other interesting stories, but I do want to say that this is an old name, and a name you may remember. Bill Husen used to live in Upshur County years ago. He was the son of missionaries who moved to Buchanan, I think, when he was a sophomore in high school. And
Yeah.
he visits and keeps in touch with people here. He came back to visit for the first time in several years last year. But he was the one that told me that about this movement nationally to have musicians come to your home. And he does that at his home in Georgia routinely. Once a month, they have musicians that come in and he hosts them, and it gives them he obviously is a really good resource for that. And that he's been doing that for several years now. So that's another thing that we started to talk about in general. If we don't find a place sometime soon, that we would probably just start looking for people's houses to go to.
So if you have a big house.
and play a big house, yeah, or a big
And
yard,
don't care.
or a big yard, or neighbors that don't mind. But there, once again, as far as stories are concerned, that there's another performer from Lewis County who came over and watched us perform. I don't know how many months he watched us perform, and I didn't know he could play. I just thought he was
like
someone
me,
kind of
who
hanging out.
can't.
And he decided to one day. He said, "I think I'm gonna." It was late in the evening, and he got up to play. And gosh, he has a wonderful baritone. And it turns out he has his own band, and he plays all the time. And he plays late '50s music. And but one of the most meaningful moments, and I know that we're going to run out of time, and you're going to probably want to
wrap it up.
wrap things up. But
he'll tell us in a minute. Here.
I think that this, I'll have to cut the chase, but this one young lady got up and had not performed in many, many years, and she got up and she sang, and then after she was finished, it was so emotional and so much strength in her voice that when she was finished, we learned that she had literally just had grabbed her child and had left on her own from her husband, and here was this emotion, because her husband would never let her perform. In all those whatever years that she'd been with him, and I was just dumbfounded that was the first thing she did. She ended up coming to Trainwreck and performed, and it was an earth-shattering moment for us, really.
And so I'd love to see this continue, and that's why I wanted Mike Oldacre, who Mike and I grew up on the hill together, back behind the city park, and we have this long history, and that's what's fun about Buchanan. And but I'd love for this music to continue, and this place for people to form community through their music. So if any of you want to contact Mike and have an idea or could help find a place for this to continue. But I also wanted the community to know that this existed, that this is a wonderful cultural event that happens right here in Buchanan, West Virginia. And speaking of Buchanan, it's so fun to connect with people, and that's fun for me to go down and be part of the audience at this music time together. And also it's good for my soul. I'd gotten some bad news about a friend dying that was from high school last week, and I'd heard on Sunday, and the following Friday was able to come to the music, and just listening to the music made me stop, and the music could soothe my soul and help me heal in some that I was going through with my friend who died. So I think this multiplies over and over again, and we're just so happy that it exists. And I want to also thank my brother for having this program where it's important to talk about the body and the spirit, and combining tender loving care. And Mike, I'll give you a last word here before our program ends, to say anything more that's right on your mind about this music.
Well, if given that opportunity, I'll just read from this book. This was handed to me by a blues musician from Chicago today. And I read the first page and I went, this is unbelievable. And this is such a serendipitous occurrence. But any of you who follow jazz musicians would know who Wynton Marsalis is. And he was interviewed in April, and this is what he said about music. Humility is the foundation of humanity. I hate to get philosophical, but it is the end of the show. When you reach out to someone, when you're empathetic, that's your humanity. When you're together. Music brings us together in thought and feeling and emotion. I just think that was a great quote and a great way to end the show. So
That's perfect. Thank you very much. So thank you, Mike, for being here with us on Tender Loving Care. And maybe Rodney's giving us a couple more minutes, so I'll say a couple things that Mike said. He's talking about Floyd Fest, and some of you know my sister Beth. Well, she lives right down near Floyd. At Meadows of Dan. Meadows of Dan, and they have a huge Floyd Fest every year, which is an outdoor week-long bluegrass festival that's wonderful up on the Blue Ridge Parkway. Some of you know my sister Beth, and just that's what's so fun about
Sure.
hearing these things. The other is my sister Ann, who lives in Durham, North Carolina, and her husband Richard loves this kind of music that's starting,
yeah,
and they've
and-
had these things. They've had musicians come to their home. And twice now they've
Is
had
that
this
right?
musician event in their home.
There's also other opportunities. I mean, Pick in the Park in Elkins on Wednesday nights, I mean, especially for bluegrass musicians, I'm sure they already know about it. If you live here, it's a ways to go, but still, if you want an outlet, there's an outlet for you. I know Ellamore used to, I don't know if they still do, they had music on Saturday nights and over at Century. There are musicians that gather over there
That's
on
right.
Sundays. I know there's several places in Clarksburg where musicians play during the week, and that was one of the suggestions that was made to me is that you may want to consider playing a different night instead of Friday, because all the musicians are usually playing in bands, and the bands are performing somewhere on Friday and Saturday nights. I think it also is important to mention that, and most people would know this by now, but Festive Fridays, sponsored by Create Buchanan, just started 2 weeks ago down at the new Jawbone Park, and that's a really wonderful venue. Now those are performances. I think we have counted. There's 3 different groups that have formed from Trainwreck, our little get together, that will be performing down at Festive Fridays, which is a neat thing to see in and of itself. There are, I know that Adam Loudon, who plays in a jazz, the Adam Loudon Trio, performed there last week, and it was a really quality jazz musicians, and I hope that they'll bring them back. They really, I thought, offered a lot. We need to hear more jazz musicians
And
here
that's
as
a
well.
summertime, 5 to 8, 2 different groups that meet at the Jawbone.
Right, and that's
on
also on Friday night.
nights.
You can in Buchanan now. You can get great opportunity for music for free because you can start at 5 o'clock and listen. There's always 2 different bands that play at Festive Fridays, and then with us anywhere from 8 to 20. I think the most musicians we ever had was 23 musicians that showed up. That was a kind of a chaotic evening when you have that many people trying to play all different kinds of music. But we have a lot more. We used to play in the front of the store or in the back of the store. Now we're playing back where the Market Bistro used to be, and so there's a lot more space.
I had a situation about a year ago. I had a girlfriend come down, and when Mike's group when they had it in the front, and he had a piano set up, an electric piano, and Marty sat down and played a little bit. Well, Mike kind of asked, "Do you play?" And she was picking at it, and so she sat down, played a concert for us for about 45 minutes, and unfortunately she couldn't stay for the Friday night, but that was wonderful. And Marty not just plays a little bit. She was a music major at Swarthmore, so it's her.
Yeah,
she's very good.
That was a pretty interesting
You
moment.
never know what's going to come out of the woodwork when you start talking music or having music together.
Yeah,